Okay, I had insomnia for 16 years and I seriously thought that I was going to have trouble sleeping for my entire life. But I have now been completely insomnia free for the last 7 years. I fall asleep in 5 to 10 minutes basically every single night of the week, and I've had no relapses of insomnia. And I did all of this without any sleeping pills, without any sleeping supplements, without crazy bedtime routines, without following a consistent sleep schedule. And today, I don't worry about my sleep at all. I'll put some Oura Ring stats up here just so you can see. I sleep great and I could care less whether I sleep or not, which is part of the clue to getting rid of it. But in this video, I'm going to share everything that I learned about insomnia broken down into 7 steps that I followed that not only got rid of the insomnia that I had that lasted for 16 years, but it kept it from ever coming back. So this is the real cure for insomnia. And it's everything that I wish someone had told me when I was lying awake in bed at 3 a.m., wondering what the heck was wrong with me. Because the truth is, nothing is wrong with you. I know it feels like there is, but your mind and body are working perfectly. You just have to learn how to work with them so they stop triggering the insomnia. Each of these 7 steps builds upon the last one. So watch this video all the way through from start to finish so that it actually makes sense. And so you can start sleeping better as soon as tonight, really. So let's dive right in to step number 1, which is I changed my entire sleep mindset. The very first thing I had to do, and honestly, this was the foundation for everything else, was I had to change the way that I thought about sleep. For years, I obsessed over my sleep. I would wake up in a bad mood. I would stress about how I was going to be able to get through the day on such little sleep. Then I would go through the entire day complaining to myself about how exhausted I was. And then I would get into bed at night and start worrying about whether I'd be up all night again. And when that cycle inevitably repeated itself and I was still wide awake after trying to sleep for hours, I would start panicking about how tired I would be the next day. All of this had to stop. All of it. So that cycle, I had to do the opposite. And one huge realization I had was that the people who sleep well, they don't do this. They don't make their entire mood revolve around how their sleep was or whether they'll sleep. So here is what I started practicing instead. I started practicing detaching my emotions from my sleep. I stopped fighting with my sleep, the internal battle. I stopped trying to force my sleep. I stopped trying to make it mean something when I couldn't sleep. And instead, I made peace with being awake at night. I told myself, even if I don't sleep, I'll still be okay tomorrow. I took all the negative attention off of sleep entirely because every time I sent frustration or fear towards my sleep, I was just reinforcing to my brain that nighttime was a time to remain awake and alert and stressed out. So I decided to just go completely neutral about sleep. Everything. No pressure to sleep, no judging myself if I didn't sleep. Whatever happened, happened. I would stay calm and I reminded myself that my body would catch up when it needed to. And really quick, before step number 2, you can tell that there's a whole lot of nuances to this insomnia thing already. And that's actually why I created a full masterclass on my website where I actually break down the 3 biggest mistakes that are secretly sabotaging your sleep and how to stop making those mistakes so your brain can finally calm down and fall asleep fast. So that link is in the description below. So make sure you sign up for that after this video because it's also going to help you a ton. Okay, now once I changed my sleep mindset, the next thing that I had to do was I had to start protecting what I was feeding my brain during the day. Step 2 is I started protecting my mind. Once I stopped sending all of that negative attention towards my sleep, I realized that I had to go one step further and I had to protect what I was feeding my mind all day long. Because if I spent all day consuming negativity, stress, drama, bad news, everyone fighting in the comments on social media, and staying really stuck in that fear-based thinking, then of course my brain was going to think that the world was ending and stay on high alert as its default state. So I made a very intentional choice to create a kind of mental bubble around myself. I stopped watching things that stress me out or put me in a bad mood, especially not right before bed. I unfollowed accounts that made me compare myself or just any tinge of annoyance, unfollow instantly. And instead, I filled my mind with things that really uplifted me and reminded me of what was possible. I went down the personal development rabbit hole pretty freaking hard. Tony Robbins, Napoleon Hill, Jim Rohn, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Eckhart Tolle. There's so many. But this is how I started rewiring my thinking. Books of these types of authors help me train my brain to think differently and start seeing life through a more empowering lens. Because here's the truth, your brain is always learning. So, whatever you focus on, you get more of. And if your brain is always marinating in fear, worry, self criticism all day, it's going to stay wired that way even at night. So, step two is about feeding your brain the thoughts and the content that make it feel safe. Because when your mind feels safe, your body follows, and it's easier to sleep when you have peace of mind. So, that brings us to step three. I also got rid of my daily stress and anxiety. Wow. Sounds impossible. It's not that hard to do. I actually made a really epic video about this topic, about how to get rid of anxiety, which I'll link in the cards up here. And it also applies to stress too. So remember to go watch that at some point also. But the way that this ties into sleep is that insomnia for most people is actually a symptom of your brain being in survival mode. Insomnia has very little to do with sleep at all. It's actually more of a symptom of stress or anxiety. And I think of anxiety a lot differently than most of the world. Anxiety is not a permanent condition or a diagnosis, it is just your body communicating to you. And the same goes for insomnia. Not sleeping or issues sleeping is your brain communicating to you that your brain doesn't feel safe to fully relax and exist in the present moment. And so it keeps you on high alert as a survival mechanism. We aren't meant to live every day in fight or flight. That should only be for actual extreme circumstances. So we got to turn down the volume on that survival response. Today, I rarely experience anxiety. And if I do, I'm able to shift myself out of it super quickly. And I know that by retraining my mind and body to not get triggered so easily, that absolutely helped my sleep improve. So go watch that video I mentioned about anxiety if you struggle with that. Now, step four is also so crucial if you want to get rid of insomnia quickly, which is I started pursuing my goals and my passions and taking it seriously. This was one of the most unexpected but powerful parts of my journey. And I think it's something that so many people overlook or they don't realize that they're not actually following what they want in life. When I had insomnia my entire life, I felt like I was just kind of getting through the day. That was the goal. Everything revolved around trying to survive the next 24 hours, and it left no room for actually living. My brain was stuck in overdrive. It was always on high alert, and it makes sense because I wasn't giving my brain anything inspiring to focus on. So I made a decision to start taking my goals and my passions seriously. Even if other people thought it was crazy or unrealistic, I just said, screw you, and I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. Because what I realized is when you feel like you're on the right path and you're doing things that excite you, that light you up, your nervous system calms down naturally. You stop living in reaction to life and you start living in alignment. For me, this looked like trying new things, switching out of jobs that I didn't like, and eventually finding work that felt more meaningful, like what I'm doing right now. But it wasn't just about career. I also started making time for doing the things that I actually love to do. So for me, that meant getting back into dance. I started taking dance classes again and surrounding myself with people who were really positive minded. The more time I spent doing things that genuinely fulfilled me, the less I was stuck in my head and worrying about sleep as well. And then my brain felt safer overall. Because if your brain feels like life is exciting and meaningful and safe, it no longer feels like it needs to keep you up all night in survival mode. And here's also what I realized once I started living in alignment with my passions and, doing more of what I found fun and interesting. My energy became one of my most valuable resources. I was finally putting my energy into things that mattered to me, which made me feel so much better during the day. But it also meant that I had to be a lot more intentionable, and a lot more intentional about what I allowed to drain me. Because if I spend my entire day excited about life, but then I let other people's drama, stress, and negativity suck all the energy and all the life out of me, I would just be right back where I started, exhausted, stressed out, and lying awake at night. So that's where step 5 came in. I had to start protecting my energy. This was another huge shift that completely changed my sleep and honestly my entire life. I used to constantly say yes to things that I actually didn't want to do all of the time, even for friends. I was too worried about what other people would think of me if I didn't show up to the party or didn't go to the bachelorette, or I spent most of my time doing just what other people expected of me, just so that I didn't piss them off, even if it wasn't what I really wanted. I was self-sacrificing so much, and that sends a signal of danger to your brain. Because when you spend so much time doing things and resenting the entire process, you keep yourself in a state of stress and annoyance. So your brain thinks that you're not safe, and that just ends up keeping your nervous system on high alert, which can carry over into the night and also impact your sleep. But even with all the positive changes I was making, there was still another big shift I needed to make because I was still walking around calling myself the I word, an insomniac. So that brings us to step 6. I stopped thinking of myself as an insomniac. At some point, I realized that I had built my entire identity around being someone with insomnia, someone who can't sleep. And guess what? My brain was listening and reinforcing that identity as long as I kept letting it run on autopilot. So I decided to stop labeling myself that way. I stopped talking about my sleep to other people. I stopped Googling every little thing about sleep. I reminded myself that everyone has the ability to sleep. I'm not some rare anomaly. And since my body already knows how to sleep, I don't need to identify as someone with any sort of sleep problem. And here is what made this shift even more powerful. I discovered that there's actually a whole way to speed up this whole process dramatically, to retrain your brain to stop running the insomnia pattern and start falling asleep almost instantly every night. Because at the end of the day, sleep isn't some mysterious thing that happens if you're lucky. No, what sleep really is, it is your brain waves slowing down. If your brain doesn't slow down, you won't sleep, period. So the fastest way to completely fix your sleep so that you're sleeping easily, consistently every night is to actually train your brain to slow down on command, which is our step number 7. And I teach you how to do it in this video right here, how to literally teach your brain to shift into the exact state it needs to be in for you to sleep. So go click this video now to learn how to slow down your brainwaves and sleep naturally every single night.